In order to film these, I basically had to destroy my bookshelf. So while I had a lot of fun destroying it and picking out the books I wanted to show you, I'm gonna regret filming these probably in an hour time when I have to put everything back into place. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Ink the Reader. Today we are doing the mid-year freakout tag. Yes, I know this technically speaking should be done in July because you might have a chance to read some other books you might want to include too during the 6 months of the year in June. But I decided to film this in June, post this in June, latter part of June, and that's fine. I think it was a nice recap for me to go through some of his questions. This year reading has I've read, clearly I've read, but I've done a lot of reading on commutes, and I am just I was just sitting down and acknowledging how I am usually at this time of the year around 50-ish books, and now mid-June I am 32 books in, and how my reading is it's decreased, unfortunately, due to just how busy I am, and also I had a very tough year, which I don't know if it's gonna get, I mean, it can't get any worse than it has been, but I don't know if it's gonna get necessarily any better. So that's to say, I really miss reading as much as I used to, but I am trying my best to read as much as I can. And yeah, hopefully in summer things will slow down a bit so I can read a bit more. But without further ado, let's get into the first question. Let's kind of go through as a rapid fire is impossible for me if you know me, because I do tend to talk a bit, but I will try to be as fast as possible. And forgive me if I don't necessarily give you a lengthy synopsis for any of the books I'm going to cover today, but I have talked about them in my wrap-up for most of them. Most of them are own, so we'll show them to you physically. That's why I destroyed my shelves. But the ones I don't have, I will just pop in a picture. So first question is, what is the best book of the year? And I didn't have to think much about these, not only because I only read 32 books. Well, what for me is only 32 books, but because there was little competition, although there was another one that's going to come up later on where I thought, oh, okay, maybe I want to mention both. So this is definitely the best of the year thus far, but I thought maybe I want to mention the other one, but I decided then to kind of stick to one per question, most of the times, not always. At times I will have more than one answer, but at the moment, best book I've read in 2025 is a January book, and it's City of Thieves by David Benioff. Yes, he is a co-producer of Game of Thrones, and this is a historical fiction that takes place during World War II in Russia. And this book was everything I wanted it to be and more. It destroyed me and never completely put me back up. I loved the writing, I loved the story, I loved the characters, and just everything that this book did for me. It was a bunch of very intense emotions in 300 pages. I felt like these characters were people I actually knew all my life, and I just fell in love with this story. And also at the same time, when you fall in love with a story that takes place during World War II, you know that it's not gonna end necessarily well. So packed a punch, this book, and it is, as I said, historical fiction, but it's really, you follow these two characters trying to find some eggs in Stalingrad, where food is very, very scarce, and so they need to venture out in the enemy lines to find these eggs. I'm just gonna leave it very vague. It is very much, if you like Game of Thrones in terms of a dialogue, the wittiness of the dialogue, you're gonna find it in here. I've done a whole review for these, which is full of spoilers, but also I've reviewed these in January if you don't want to hear any spoilers. So yeah, love these two pieces, and this is the book I would recommend to anyone who's partial to historical fiction. But in general, honestly, even if you don't read historical fiction much, you don't need to be like a big historical fiction reader to enjoy and get all the feelings out of these. And best sequel, I had again a couple of answers, but in the end this is the sequel that I appreciated the most, because I was not expecting to enjoy the sequel. I had not loved the first one as much as other people did, so I thought, okay, the second book people tended overall to like slightly less than the first one, so I guess it's gonna be even worse. Actually, it was much better than the first one, for me at least. And I'm talking about The Tyranny of Faith by Richard Swan. This is the second book in the Empire of the Wolf series. And it's a trilogy that now has a new sub-series that started, that takes place kind of 100 years after, or something of the sort. So it's creating a world. And the first book, I think, while it's very much like an investigative high fantasy, and our three main characters have to investigate what happened, in this one you kind of follow very much from the events of the first book. And these, I believe, worked best for me because I got to actually appreciate all the characters more. I had some issue with our main character, or like our narrator in book number 1, found her a bit dull up until the end, and then in this one she really stands her ground, so I really appreciated her. But also this gets way more violent and horror-ish. It was already hinted at in the first book. There were some intense scenes, but in here we get a proper, I would say, we are breaching into the realm of horror fantasy, which I'm a big fan of horror, combine it with fantasy, which is my biggest love probably when it comes down to literature. It's just a good combo for me. So it worked very well, and it left me thinking I need to read the third book. I generally actually now want to know what happens next. New releases that have already come out and you have yet to read. So the two most prominent ones on my TBR, which are happening very, very soon, are The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I have now, the thing with this is that because it's so popular, everyone is reading it, everyone is talking about it, and although people are usually very careful not to give spoilers away, you really start to put a narration together once you hear a review from this one and then a review from someone else, and then each one of those people, while being careful, they will let slip some smaller details, and in the end, if I hear 1,000 or like maybe 1,000, it's definitely too optimistic, but if I hear 20 reviews of these, at the end I will have gathered too many informations. I will be spoiled somehow to certain degrees, so I think I just need to read this for myself because it's just too fresh, it's too popular, everyone is talking about it. I've got the beautiful broken binding edition. I've unboxed it in May, so if you're interested to see inside the book, I do show you a proper close-up in that video. So The Devil, new start of an epic high fantasy series by Joe Abercrombie, which I've heard is also hilarious, and you follow a motley crew on different missions. My understanding is for some people it didn't work the humor. Usually Abercrombie humor works for me quite well, and I heard it's quite episodic in itself, which doesn't really usually work for me, but I hope that the humor can rescue the structure, which doesn't sound like my thing, but I got a good vibe about this, I don't know. And the next one and the last one for this question is The Night and the Moth. Pretty much the same concept. I'm hearing too many things about these. All amazing, all positives. I am starting to wonder how soon I will be spoiled, and I would like very much to avoid that. This is I think it's a romantic fantasy only to a certain degree. I would describe it as just a fantasy with a hint of romance in it. What really got my attention is that I heard it's quite intense. It's quite, not spooky, but it's quite gothic. And I'm definitely up for a gothic fantasy with a bit of romance in it. If it's done well, I really appreciate it usually. So yeah, those two, and I am... and this is very painful for my arm, are priority reads. And then the next question is, what is a release for the next part of the year that you are interested in reading in particular? And this can only be Empire of the Dawn by J. Christoph. I want to say that I'm one of the biggest fans of Empire of the Vampire. That book is perfect for me. I really loved the sequel as well. And now I want to see how he wraps this all up. Epic high fantasy with vampires. It's just the perfect combo again. It works for me. But now let's get to the controversial one, and this is gonna be controversial, so get ready with the unsubscribe. But jokes aside, you do what you want. Honestly, if it bothers you to stick around or to subscribe to a channel where their views are different than yours, fair enough. But yeah, thank you for having joined thus far. But I'm gonna be honest, and I'm just gonna bring the two most, the biggest disappointments. I'm gonna make a cavovo because the first one is The Biggest Disappointment. It's a book that actually I didn't particularly like. I respected the fact that she put it out there. I understood the reasoning behind, but I just felt it was okay, and the audiobook narrated by the author unfortunately really bothered me. I didn't appreciate the experience, and I'm talking about I'm Glad My Mom Died. It's a super popular non-fiction from a child actress, and now has grown up and put this out. Again, this is not a critique of the content of the book, which I think she was quite brave to put out, and disclosing and speak about everything that she has gone through, which was incredibly tough. But I just don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if it was with prose or again the audio part. I found the audio particularly jarring, but I found this book just so right. I am quite used to, especially in the past, to read a lot of true stories or biographies about people that have been through trauma or domestic violence or you name it, and there are some that really stood out to me. It's not about the content in itself, it's probably about how the prose or how you tell your story, or just something that you communicate to me through the pages, and somehow we didn't connect in this story, which doesn't absolutely take away of the importance of the content. But because it was so popular, I was expecting to go into this book and absolutely blown away by it. Must also say I did not know her, never watched her stuff when she acted as a child. Me and Carly, well, Sam and Cat, well, I don't know her, so it was maybe that it's also why we didn't connect that well. And the other one, it's not a book I disliked, it's actually a book that I probably gave it 4 stars. And I generally stand by that. I think it's generally, I completely get why people love it, I generally do. But I went into this book again thinking about this is gonna be 5 stars, it's gonna enter my top 5 books by this author, which I've started to read quite a good chunk, like maybe 15 or something around that number by now. And I was expecting these to be on my top 5 of the author, and it wasn't. So it was great, I enjoyed it, as always. Love his prose and his writing, but the plot in itself, it was okay. I actually found this book at times dull, and I'll explain why in a second, but I'm talking about 11/22/63 by Stephen King. I didn't care much about the romance. Really loved her, the female interest, the female protagonist, if you want, of this in the very end, but throughout the biggest core of this book, which is the romance, I didn't care that much. Again, I did wrap this up some point during the months, I think February or March, so you can find all my thoughts in there, while I unpack it quite well. Why I didn't love this, it wasn't a 5 stars. Said that I do love his writing, as I said. Really love the first part of the book, like the first part of the book before the romance starts, 5 stars, 6 stars, loved it. And then the romance starts, and then for a huge 400 pages, I was okay, again because he writes so well, but I wasn't that invested anymore. Enjoyed the ending quite a lot, but he lost something for me. I lost something of attachment I had in the first 200 pages, in those 400 middle pages. Well, it's not even middle pages. So it is a disappointment because I was expecting this to enter the Hall of Fame when it came down to Stephen King because of everything I'd heard, but it didn't, while remaining an absolutely good read. Biggest surprise. For this I thought, how about we do the reverse of the biggest disappointment? So for the biggest disappointment, I chose a book that I was expecting to be Hall of Fame, 5 stars, best of the year, and it wasn't. I will be very good. And for the biggest surprise is a book that I also gave it 4 stars, and by the opposite happened. I thought, I don't know if it's gonna be for me, sci-fi horror. I'm very new to it, so I'm dipping my toes more into it, but I had yet to find one that really works perfectly. So none of the sci-fi horror I've read thus far were 5 stars, although probably what I liked the best was last year. I really enjoyed Leviathan Awakes. That is the closest it got to, kind of got a 5 stars. I think it got 4.75 or 5, but that was last year. So this year I was like, let me try this very popular book, but I don't know if I'm gonna love it or not, and I really enjoyed it, and I didn't think I would. And I'm talking about Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I somehow had this preconception that this book was so popular but when I heard reviews or when people spoke about the content, I was like, oh, I think it's gonna be a disappointment in the end. And it wasn't. It actually kept my attention. I was glued to the pages. I really enjoyed the writing, but also the atmosphere it creates. And I picked up this about myself, is that books tends to have a better chance with me when there is a mystery inside. Whether this is a fantasy mystery, a sci-fi horror mystery, if there is something that I need to discover, or that I am like, what's going on here, let me figure it out, making speculations, trying to put clues together, it always kind of gets my attention a bit more. And especially if it delivers in the end, it's just the, you know, the cherry on the cake. So yeah, I really like this. I will continue on with the series. I'm a bit skeptical because the rest of the series is not as praised as the first one, but I think there are 4 books in this series and I do want to continue on. Favorite new author to me, I will have to repeat, David Benioff. I want to read The 25th Hour, something like that. I just love his writing, and although I have consumed other stuff where I think he had some creative input, like Game of Thrones, but I've never read him, so I technically consider him as a new, I mean, he's a new author to me, it's not a lie. So, new fictional crush. Oh god, I didn't really have one, but I am currently reading The Rose Bargain, which is a YA romantic fantasy, and there is a guy called Emmett. I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a guy in it, Emmett. And while this is something that will probably very likely wrap up at the end of June, and it's the story, it's kind of like The Bachelor, but in an alternative history England, where there is a fae queen, and you make a bargain in exchange for something, you give something and then you get something back. And this year around, our main protagonist, she's offered the hand of a prince if she can convince him of marrying her among other 6 girls. So she goes in for a bunch of reasons, but she's helped and supported in her plan by the brother of a prince, Emmett. And Emmett is probably the closest it gets to a fictional crush, in the sense that I really like the guy. He's just the right combination of sassy but also caring, and as of now I'm just probably 3/4 into the book. I am a fan of him. I don't know if I would consider him a crush, but I do know that if I was in that book, if I was the protagonist of that book, I would definitely be interested in Emmett. Like, I can see why this is going where this is going. I agree, I would probably feel the same. New favorite characters, and in these I will mention the other book that I thought about mentioning in my favorite of the year. It is definitely top 10. Definitely the top 5 at the moment, but again, we got still 6.5 months to go, but I can't see these disappearing from the podium at the end of the year. And I'm talking about Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. This is a horror. It's the story of a boys only orphanage that becomes hunted by the devil, very literally, and I loved it. It has been since The Exorcist, I think, that I've not read a good like possession story. This has now entered my Hall of Fame of possession stories, because apparently that is a thing for me, at least for me it's a thing. I loved everything about this book. I loved how it can do horror while letting us imagine some of the most horrific scenes, which can be even worse than actually explicitly splatterishly, let's go with that, go into it. There's violence, there's horror, but there is a limit that it draws, and then we go with our imagination past that limit, and I think it just works great. It was just, I wouldn't change one bit about this book. 5 stars, hands down. And The Boys, and I'm gonna say that I enjoyed this cast of characters immensely, because good or bad, they're of course big fan of the good ones, but the bad ones, I understood where the corruption was coming from, and rather than feeling like, oh, you are like, you know, your weakness has been exploited, I felt like, I get it why you let go. I understand why at one point it was just too much, and then you had to give in the evilness, the evil, and that made me kind of feel for everyone in this story, which is exactly what you want, so you can be fully devastated when this all takes place. I'm being very vague, but trust me, if you are like horror and you're looking for a good possession devil, the devil that it's nuanced, a devil that it's not just violence for the sake of violence. The violence of these devils goes past the physical violence present, but it goes definitely past it. It goes inside, it goes insidious inside. Love Boys in the Valley. Amazing book, amazing horror book. My favorite characters, all the cast of these characters, love them. And I could have definitely went with City of Thieves because there's whatsoever no chance that Kolya is my favorite character probably I've read in the last very good amount of years. So let me say that Kolya would be the answer, but I didn't want to keep repeating myself with City of Thieves. And I did generally connect or understood so much of all of those boys and the people involved in these. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that. But if I was allowed to repeat myself, I would go with Kolya from City of Thieves. Both read these. I know I'm confusing you, am I not? I'm just gonna move on. A book that made you cry. This one. This one actually made me tear up. I did tear up with this. I was genuinely devastated, and I said in my review, I didn't understand for a few days why I was so upset, and then I thought, it's about the book. Like, I am genuinely so upset at the end of this book, but I felt very, very sad about Boys in the Valley too at the end. So again, by no means to this degree, this is heightening up all my emotions, but yeah, also Boys in the Valley, but I was devastated. On the opposite side, a book that made me happy, and this book, I talked about this in my most recent wrap-up, so the May wrap-up, and this book not only made me happy, but it made me happy in, again, one of the bleakest moments of my life, and it gave me a smile, like even if it was maybe a tiny smile or like a small giggle when I was feeling so down. And I'm talking about A Wish Upon the Stars by T.J. Klune. This is the fourth and not final book in a series by T.J. Klune. It's a humoristic fantasy. It's a trope on The Chosen One. You follow in the first book, and all of the books to be fair, Sam, a wizard apprentice for the prince that one day will be king, and so he will become his wizard, going on a bunch of adventures while being desperately in love with Ryan Foxhart, who's captain of the guard, and at the very beginning of the story he's also betrothed to the prince. So Sam is hopeless in love, he's trying to do his best, but life is throwing a lot of shit his way, and he is getting in a lot of trouble together with his best friends. It's a very peculiar story. It uses tons of humor. It's a humor that you either like it or you hate it, and if you hate it, leave it down, never pick up this book again. Sometimes even for me, the humor, especially in the second and third book, combined with some very explicit sex scenes, was a bit too much. It became almost too redundant, like the sexual jokes at one point, but in this book there is less sex scenes. Actually there's one or two sex scenes, and somehow, because it's putting together all the plot, the characters, although they move very slowly through these, they do move here and there, and all the characters are present. So I just love the dynamics. I just love to see how he finished this part of the series, because this completed Sam, the one that focuses on Sam, I believe, is completed with these, and it's still very hilarious because the humor just works for me. His jokes, the way Sam thinks, I can relate to that. Maybe that's for the worst, but if you read this, you know what I mean. Sam has got a very hectic mind, but I could relate to him, and I honestly, some of the banter in these, some of the jokes, some of the scenes that they went through was just hilarious. Just hold a spot in my heart because it was there. This book was there for me when I thought I was drowning. Most beautiful books I have bought. I mean, where to start, guys? I have got so many special editions this year. I've done some epic unboxings. I will, especially the epic one, I will link it down below, but I don't know if you can see it. I'm gonna insert a close-up. What you are seeing right now is just the spines of the 3 books in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I got the broken binding editions, and again, if you want to see any or more of these, I will link down below the unboxing I did, because yeah, it's just something that I've done a close-up where I show you the ins and out of the book. But just look at the spines, they are remarkable. Devils is also amazing. All the Fairy Loot I've got, the Lumin Crate I got. Like, I'm generally so blessed that I am able at this moment in time to keep up with my book subscriptions. And yeah, it just really makes my month when I tend to unbox it whenever bad day, or I just need to really hold the book in my hands. It grounds me a bit. So yeah, I do my unboxings and I always without failure feel better afterward. But yeah, the last question, I thought I'm gonna take the occasion to, basically the last question is, what are the priority reads for the rest of the year? And I thought about kind of sharing with you a bit my TBR for the summer and onwards. And I thought about, okay, these are all the books I want to kind of get to as soon as possible, and I might just divide them in category. I'm gonna just quick fire them at you. So starting with sci-fi, let's say all the books I need to read in the sci-fi category. So definitely Sun Eater. I need to start this series. This one I'm holding is another beautiful edition by the Broken Binding. I am gonna try to link it down below this unboxing if I can find it, but this is Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. I need to start this series because again everyone has been raving about this. And in the sci-fi category I also really want to read Roadside Picnic. This is something that's been on my shelves for long enough, and I think you got like an area of a world where aliens have come and gone, and then people go there to kind of find artifacts to resell at the black market, and our main protagonist needs to go there because his son has gone missing or something. But it's quite short and I've heard great things about Roadside Picnic, so I need to read that one. I also need to read The Free Body Problem because I've not watched the TV show yet. I wanted to read the book first. No idea what this is about. Again, I think it's like something that they need to discover. With something is going on. There's like a secret cabal of scientists that they need to infiltrate to discover something. Let me try this author. I've never read anything by this author, I believe, and I know that it can be quite cryptic as a story, but hopefully I will like it and then move on to watch the show. And finally, for the sci-fi, I do need to read Hyperion. This again, it's in the May unboxing, the Broken Binding edition, but I need to read Hyperion, which I believe is a collection of short stories that both are very much connected to each other, and is they're trying to save this planet. Or it says, it occurs to me that our survival might depend upon our talking to another. So, and I don't know anything else. I think it's a survival story, a world on the brink of destruction, and some pilgrims, I believe, trying to save it. I don't know if each pilgrim gets his own story or if a pilgrim is only one story. Is this even a collection of short stories? I don't know. I thought they were like a bunch of stories that have an overarching plot, but I might be completely wrong. So that's to say I need to read Hyperion. So those are the four priorities when it comes down to sci-fi. I'm also currently reading Caliban's War, so I might want to read the one next because I'm really enjoying it. So I might want to read the next one. Then we have a fantasy category. I will start with a romantic fantasy, more like low stakes fantasy if you want. I don't know if that's the correct one to say, but more like not epic high fantasy. So I want to read the last book in the trilogy of Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, so I need to read this one very soon. I also want to finish the duology Where the Library Hides by Isabella Ibanez, and I want to read The Rag Picker King by Cassandra Clare. And I do want to read this one that came with a fairy loot, This Monster of Mine, because I was really intrigued by the synopsis. The synopsis about this girl that she gets attacked with intention to be killed. They don't manage to kill her. She survives, and then she starts working for this man who she thinks might be the assassin, and then she has to find out the whole conspiracy behind it or something of the sort. So I've not heard anything about these, but the synopsis really intrigues me, so this is on my priority list. I also would like to finish Vilest. No, I think it's not actually, it's gonna be a trilogy, so I want to continue with Vilest Things by Chloe Gon, because again I've read the first book and it was alright, didn't love it, but I want to read it. I would also love to read Bonesmith by Nikki Poe Prito. This is a duology, and I heard great things about this YA. I think it's YA, young adult, I'm not sure, but I've heard great things. And I wouldn't mind having a read of A Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is a very popular romantic fantasy, and it's a vampire romantic fantasy, which again, vampire buzzword for me. So looking forward to potentially reading this year. When it comes down to actual epic high fantasy, I want to read The Trials of Empire, finish this trilogy, so then I can move on to the other series in the same world, because I've heard it's like horror fantasy and I'm really up for it, and the pages are gorgeous. I've got the Broken Binding edition. I do want to finish this trilogy. I need to read Jade Legacy, but this is a brick and it is a bit intimidating, but I've recently read Jade War and I enjoyed it enough to want to continue on and finish this trilogy by Fonda Lee. Also, I'm not mentioning, of course, The Knight and the Moth and the Devils, because I already mentioned them. I would also like to read something by Christopher Bulleman, because I've read his medieval horror last year, loved it to pieces. So this is The Black Tongue Teeth, and I also have here The Daughter's War. I don't know which one comes first. I think maybe The Daughter's War is a prequel, so I don't know which one I'm gonna read first, but would like to read something by him. I do need also to continue on with The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie, the standalones in between the first Law trilogy and the sequel trilogy. I've read Best Served Cold last year, so I need to continue on. And two series I would like to start are The Tainted Cup by Bennett. I've read another book by him at the time and really enjoyed his writing, but never continued on with that. That's The Staircase, probably it's wrong, but anyway, I've read the first book in that series and never continued on because my library didn't have the books, but that's the only reason why I didn't continue on. And then I want to read The Darkness That Comes Before, which is a grim dark fantasy, and when I've heard the synopsis of these and I've heard a few reviews of people really enjoying this grim dark fantasy, so I want to give it a try. Okay, very quickly going through the last stack of things I want to read. When it comes down to thriller crime, I just want to read The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Castle, a book that's been on my shelves for 1,000 years, and I want to, finally read it. This is about a day that keeps repeating until the guy can resolve the case. Sounds intriguing. When it comes down to horror, I want to read The Troop by Nick Cutter, because everyone speaks about The Troop when it comes down to the horror community, so I need to read this body horror. I also would really like to pick up this trilogy, which is the Gormentage trilogy. This is the story of a community that lives in a castle, and the guy that actually the ruler of his community never left the castle, and now he really wants to leave the castle. I heard it's gothic and very atmospheric, and so I want to read this, and it has a beautiful cover, and then I've not heard many people talk about it, so I want to read it. And I also need to read another Adam Neville, because of course is Adam Neville. I love everything I've read by him. He wrote one of my favorite horror Edda, so but I picked up all the Fiends of Hell, so curious to read this. I also need to prioritize and read the Illumicrate things that they sent my way, and lately they sent me Check Wending the Staircase in the Wood, and I would like to give this a try. I've heard mixed things about this, but again, it looks gorgeous, and why not try that. But also absolutely a priority for me when it comes down to horror is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is based on something that really happened. I don't know if the story is based on a true story, but it definitely is based on true events. So this is about a black boy that, because of miscarriage of justice, he is sent to an orphanage where there are ghosts around, and when the boys inside are treated very poorly. She's a great writer, and I wanted to read something else by her, so this seems like the right pick for me. When it comes to historical fiction, the only one that I really want to read this year if I can is Catch-22, because it's so popular, it's so famous. There is a way of saying, it's a Catch-22 situation. I want to know where that comes from. And the last two I would put like in a literature fiction category, but one could be also considered a horror, so I'm not sure. I'm talking about, this is not the horror, Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. I've read her Frankenstein book, really enjoyed it, so I want to read this, and it's about grief, about a bunch of sisters that lose one of them. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting read. And finally, I am gonna read Blackwater. This is the stunning UK editions. It's divided. In USA, I think you got a whole book, but here it's divided like this. And I heard this it's a family saga, but also there's a bit of horror-ish in it. So we will see. I am very much intrigued. Okay, my battery says it's time to go. Let me know what would you answer to those questions in the comments down below. I hope to hear from you. I hope you decide to stick around. I'll see you next time. Take care. Ciao!